Alright guys, listen up. I have an announcement to make. This is completely real and I am not kidding. I've had a lot of time to look at myself in the mirror since all I do is be a trollsome hate monger on the internet. I don't do anything else. Golden bent boy. And I've decided that for my 2024 New Year's resolution, I am going to truly embrace who I am on the inside. As of right now, I identify as Gap gender. You were to refer to me with Gap self pronouns, and my new name is Gap Icon Gappy Starbolt. If you don't follow this very simple set of rules at all times, I will cave your skull in with a smithing hammer. That is the video. Have a good one. Throughout all my time of talking about SMBF, I kinda lost sight of the broader picture. As it turns out, there are plenty of awesome developers out there that actually know what they're doing and can put out amazing games without thousands of Epic Games dollars to burn and without 10-year-old franchises stapled onto their resumes. Something shocking that I learned is that the budget for Bird Tapper was $175, and yet it holds up far better than anything Nicrama's put out since the beginning of their tenure with the Meat Boy franchise. But I'm not here to have the most one-sided rap battle in history with the gaggle of buffoons that will never break even on their tech demos. Who gave you that idea? Instead, I want to set my sights on the best of the best of the best, who actually have a chance to make the finest platformery that the internet can provide. One of those people is Levi Ramirez, whom I learned about and somewhat fell in love with as I pedaled down his library. His Gappy series in particular is one that I've really grown attached to. It's a series of games, and not just games, mind, but a series of autorunners. Yeah, that word has been somewhat tarnished over the last few years, but the Gappy games were a pleasant surprise on my part, mainly because I've been waiting in the proverbial sewers for nearly 3 years straight at this point. They turned out to be some solid titles that I suggest you pick up at some point if you're looking for an autorunner fix. Not only are they technically and mechanically sound, but I was somewhat taken aback by the level of inspiration and charm dumped into each and every title. They have absolutely no right to pull me back in as much as they do. Having said that, I stopped writing the review right around this point to go play Gappy 2. That's how you know you have bangers just waiting for you. Gappy 1 isn't what I would call the most simplistic of the three, but I would opt to call it efficient. You're given a jump, figure it out. With an autorunner, you're intrinsically limited in the things that you can do, and that's just a fact. The less you have of something, the harder it is to do what you want. But the thing that I admire about the Gappy games is that it hardly feels like it a lot of the time. Such simple stuff like bumping into the walls to turn yourself around makes you aware very early on that it's a game that pulls every facet of the gameplay into an engaging gameplay loop that makes use of every last thing that an autorunning control scheme brings along with it. Very rarely do I feel like I'm not in control, and that not only comes from the manner in which the game's caveats are malformed and integrated, but it mainly comes from the level design. Everything you have to do is right in front of you at all times, and there's nary a lick of tedious backtracking. If you do find yourself failing at a particularly tricky part, the level isn't so butt-fuckingly long that it takes 15 years to get back to that part. This definitely came into clutch in later levels, where some of the mechanics get uppity, and it takes a fair amount of time to get used to them. Even with that, it takes the time to introduce the newer mechanics and implement them in such a way that serves to amplify the gameplay in service of extending the amount of level that you actually play. Realistically, you have about 2 screens worth of gameplay in any one level, yet the button switches and crumbling blocks give you far more to look forward to as you pass them by. I know I just said that there's a lack of tedious backtracking in this game, but the key word there is tedious. Never once did I feel like I was retreading ground or needlessly doddering around in a single place at one time. The game is fantastic at keeping the momentum up, and it's paramount to the gameplay loop coming off as seamlessly as it does. The length of the levels seriously, and I mean seriously, saved my enjoyment of this game. Every time I get frustrated at a level and I feel like I'm getting bullshitted by unfair mechanics, I just remember how comically short the level is, and by the time I even start getting pissed that I died at that one particular part, I'm already back to the part that I died at, ready to give it another go. Having long stretched out levels seems fine on paper, but delivering the difficulty heavy-handed in small bursts will always be the way to go. Talented devs proving once again that short and sweet is the superior option for a precision platformer. Then again, I'm sure Levi actually playtested these levels instead of turning on NoClip and calling it a day. On top of that, some of the more straightforward and almost gimmicky mechanics are handled in such a way that still gives you an overwhelming amount of control in the moment. For example, the fireballs in the castle level. No matter what, the fireballs will always be faster than you, giving you ample time to dodge them in any way you see fit depending on where you are. Whether you choose to wait it out or go right for it, it's all in your hands with the amount of time you're given to stop and think. Another example is the spiky ball walls that Ultra Greed throws at you in the final battle. You will always be able to jump higher than them, ensuring that you're never forced to not perform an action at any time and allowing you to either jump over it or go under it. If there's one thing that I would have to say about the gameplay, it's that I sometimes found myself fumbling around on one set of awkward geometry if I messed up a jump, which happened a lot in one particular level, and especially the harder version of it in the B-side. But you're still given ample time and opportunities to reorient yourself and get back into the swing of things before the lava gets to you. There's very little learning to be had in this game, or any of the games for that matter, but that's totally okay, since it's not only made up for but amplified by the raw timing and skill required to beat these levels. And it isn't the bad type of timing where you're bombarded with a gauntlet filled with stupidly unfun obstacles. Rather, it's all about nailing the platforming on the first try, which is much more than doable for this game. Something I didn't realize on my first go is that you're given a bonus if you go through deathless, and it's not a tacked on game mechanic or required for your progression, but it's a bonus. Simply that, just a bonus, totally out of the way. It's a game that wholeheartedly gives you the perfect path to run down and all the tools you need to succeed without overstaying its welcome by making it purely reaction based. That seems like a scathing indictment, but it really isn't. Pulling off that perfect run feels nowhere near as insurmountable as, say, grinding for S ranks. It's a game that truly rewards you for going out of your way and learning its MO, and quite frankly, I'll take a higher score over a squirrel any day of the week. Aesthetic-wise, this game is very in tune with the NES style. I don't mean that in just the way it looks. Any bozo can go into MS Paint and bang out graphics with a drab color palette and call it an NES game. Rather, I get that feeling from the sound design and the music. The fucking music, man. I hear that music, I'm taken straight to Back to the Future. It's music that's repetitive yet catchy, the kind of music that you can listen to for hours and never have it become grating to you. Whether that was intentional or on accident, it's that style to a T. That and a lot of the choices creatively speaking. As it turns out, the dude you've been rescuing for the entire game is just called Coin Friend. Like, that's such an unapologetically 80s thing to do, giving your coin friend such a simple name like Coin Friend. Put me and Joe Biden in a room, I'm gonna convince him that this is an actual game you could buy in the 80s. Everything in this game feels so conclusive, and it doesn't feel like it wants to be a billion things at once. It's simple, stylized, fruitful, and more than a solid pick if you're into a lot being done with very little. Gappy 2 is easily my favorite out of the entire trilogy, and the one that I return to the most out of all the games. Having said that, I just took another break to play through it again. Tommy Rafenis only dreams that he can captivate my interest this hard. This game takes everything the first one had and doubles down on it 1,000-fold. I mean, maybe not that much, but it's really, really good. Finally, after all these years, we get money. The coins don't serve a whole lot of purpose in this game, but they're still a cool collectible that can really get you to try some risky jumps to be able to get them all. Plus, it shot the replayability of this game through the roof when I attempted to go after these after mastering the levels. On top of that, we're finally introduced to a wall jump that makes the game feel like an Autorunner in name alone. You have such a hold over Gappy, and it never feels as though you're put on a rail, far from it. You're allowed to do much more through the wall jump, especially in the snow chapter where you're able to cling to the wall and let the icicles pass you by. There's also the potential for readjustment and getting back on course if you mess up a jump, which can help extensively if you're going after the deathless achievements, and the mechanic of moving forward once you slide off a wall, which can lead to some great flow and feels more like a tool than a detriment. The fantastic level design is back, giving you a solid path to go down and relying exclusively on the controls that you're given, all while being perfectly condensed so there's zero unnecessarily long portions of just running in a straight line. There's no longer a need to jump at a wall with the express purpose of turning around. The wall jump accomplishes that and more by making the game just flow so elegantly. The gravity and speed at which you move completely and utterly transforms the game into something truly special. It's tough to put into words. I guess I can say this. If a full game was created with like 300 of these levels with this control scheme, I would buy it and play the shit out of it. The mechanics thrown in here are truly neat since they get rid of any and all timing for the gameplay loop. The fireballs in the first game were pushing it just a smidge, but in this game, every last death will be 100% your fault. Just the way I likes it. Not Not to mention that my two favorite levels in the entire trilogy are in this game. I say two because I love both of them for numerous reasons, and it's tough to pick a favorite. 3-7 gives you the option to either go the entire length of the level, or if you're adept with a control scheme and layout, you're able to go right for the button and finish the level quicker than if you had taken the normal route. This is the level of open-ended gameplay that I feel like an Autorunner should strive for. Alternative paths that don't make you feel like you're on some fucked up roller coaster, all while completely relying on your control scheme. The best levels in SMBF barely do this. At the very best, they're long stretches of raw platforming that simply rely on nothing more than jumping, and those show up far and few in between for me to consider them highlights. All thanks to the random generation that people swear up and down doesn't ruin the game. I could get one of the best levels in the game, or one of the worst ones in the game, and there's nothing I can do to control it beyond a fucking seed at the beginning. And the final level, holy shit, the final level, dude. Just from looking at it, it looks eerily similar to a warp zone in Super Meat Boy, but it also feels like that. I get the exact same level of control and satisfaction from bouncing through a Super Meat Boy level as I do bouncing through this level right here. The fact that a totally random game not nearly on the same level of notoriety as Meat Boy is able to do that when a quote-unquote Meat Boy game isn't, that speaks volumes. SMBF has more controls to work with than this game, and yet this game doesn't miss a beat. I didn't feel like I was on a rail, had complete and utter control of the character, and I was able to execute the moves that I wanted to with zero strings attached and an ironclad path to go down, with every single blunder being my fault. The only thing that this level lacks are notches in the level design to give you shortcuts. That isn't to say that the level isn't fantastic for how basic it is, but that one tiny detail of branching paths all converging onto the destination would put it on the level of Edmund Macmillan's best works. Oh, what the fuck are you doing here? Get the fuck out of my good game. And to think I almost said I liked this game. Yeah, that's another thing I didn't really mention. A lot of the level names in this game are super endearing. It harkens right back to Super Meat Boy, and it kinda makes you wonder why Levi called them that. And it serves as a stellar way to speak to the players. I mean, it definitely doesn't hold a candle to the most generic level names in human history, but E for effort, I guess. On top of that, the final part of the game where it gives you the "you did it" speech in every single video game ever created, believe me, I checked, only for it to slap you in the nuts with the amount of times you died. It's a stellar subversion that, holy shit, I think Super Meat Boy 2 is calling to me from another realm. If I had to say one thing about the aesthetic, it's that it isn't as stylized as the first Gappy game. It still looks completely fine, but it seems more or less like more detailed pixel art, and not the kind you would see in later NES games. Plus, some obvious cut corners, like the snow in the snow chapter being a single sprite that scrolls downwards. I wouldn't sacrifice the style for how fantastic the game is in every other respect. The awesome music is back, being catchy as ever, and going through a lot of tonal shifts to fit the mood, and yet still maintaining the satisfying drone factor. A medal for the Cloud chapter for once again being my favorite in the respect that the music in it goes way harder than my Winkus when I start thinking about pirate tickle torture. Main gripe that I would still say I hold is that I wish there was more. That's the best compliment I could possibly give to a game. But it's painful that there's such a perfectly good gameplay loop and control scheme here, and it's only utilized for such a short time. At least in the first Gappy game, you got some more content in the form of the B-side. But there's nothing like that in Gappy 2 beyond unlocking skins for Gappy. Once again, though, that's only a testament to how great the game is in every other respect, that I can only ask for more of it when all is said and done. Gappy 3 is easily the simplest and easiest out of the three. A lot of the stuff that I loved about Gappy 2 was taken out, such as the wall jump, but it's replaced with the double jump that makes use of the wall bumping seen in the first game. But it takes on a new role, as double jumping in combination with it is necessary to make a lot of the jumps and pull off the tighter moves in the game. The whole game seems more like Gappy 1 in nature, especially in the level design, which puts even more emphasis on the backtracking, but once again never impedes on the flow of a level. I will say that since the wall jump is gone, we kinda slip back into awkwardly bumbling around if you mess up a jump, but the double jump definitely helps to get back on course if and when that happens to you. Plus, it never seems like a major problem since the level design is far more streamlined this time around. It also mixes in some new mechanics that serve as great tools that flesh out the level design, such as buttons that flip the level's gravity, and balloons that give you a boost in midair, recharge your double jump, and work wonders for the flow of a level. If I had to choose a game that I thought was the most similar to Geometry Dash, I would say Gappy 3 fits that bill. When these mechanics mix together and give you a satisfying flow to an impending gauntlet, it really becomes tough to say that it's worse than 2 because it gets rid of the wall jump. It more or less feels like the fantastic control was recontextualized into new options that work far better for an easier game like this. One thing that I'll say is that the aesthetic in this game is probably the strongest out of the 3. Gappy himself was inspired by Kirby, anyone with 2 human eyes could figure that out. But the Game Boy style works fantastically for his character design, and the monochrome style for the graphics doesn't sacrifice the individuality of the worlds. This isn't to leave out the final world, which definitely ticks the box of some older games having some completely out of nowhere nightmare fuel level that gets a younger lad spooked enough that he remembers it forever. There was never a case where I felt like the worlds in the previous game melted into each other, but the ones in 3 are extremely distinct and memorable, especially when we're talking about the fucking music, dude. Special props to my boy Drive for making this fantastic soundtrack, but it feels the most in tune with the theme of the game by far out of the 3 games. It's better than catchy, it's better than fitting, it feels almost dreamy. There are very few pieces of media that actually make me feel like I played or saw them when I was a kid, but fuck me if this isn't one of them. Forget Joe Biden, if you tried to convince me for long enough, you could have me believing that this was a game that you could buy in the 90s. Every single track in the game has a special touch that makes it perfect for the world it's in and even amplifies the world in a lot of cases. From the upbeat track for the circus, to the mellow track for the pool, to a track that legitimately feels like a successor to the moon theme from DuckTales, to the track in the final world that seriously makes me feel somewhat emotional if I'm tired enough. Despite the minor reservations I have about the gameplay, this game feels completely accurate to the era. It's absolutely surreal. Gappy 3 is the one that you could say is the weakest of the 3, but it took some of the greatness of 2 and dumped it into an overwhelmingly charming aesthetic that I wouldn't sacrifice for a wall jump. Something about the final text crawl with it reassuring you that it was all a dream really hits me in a way that I wasn't expecting in the slightest. Also, I couldn't help but notice this one part in there about a man with a strange shaped head.
I understood that reference.
I have nothing but love for this game, and it's not even the one that I come back to the most out of the 3. It's more than just a game, it's a wonderful piece of art that had no right to get me feeling all mushy on the inside. And that's it, those are the Gappy games. Each one brings something neat to the table, and it wouldn't be the same if it was just the same game copy and pasted 3 times. And I can actually say that because each game has something to praise, where I struggle to think of something SMBF did that improves upon the first game beyond their save files. The brutality of the first game, the gameplay of the second game, and the charm of the third game are all solid examples on how you can ultimately do a lot with very little. The benefit of hindsight bullshit doesn't even apply here, since these were made before SMBF was a thing. There are multiple ways you can make an Autorunner worthwhile, and it's a little disturbing for me to have ever thought otherwise. I feel like a far more worthwhile New Year's resolution would be going over games that I feel embody the best that platformers and indie devs in general can provide. I've got loads of games on the docket that I enjoy deeply and want to get out there rather than talking about the same old and dying franchise that I've built my channel around. I think I'll enjoy making these videos far more, and I think you guys will enjoy seeing some new faces on the channel, since the Bird Tapper video did surprisingly well. As for Levi Ramirez, I'll leave links to all his stuff in the description. He's a seriously skilled and talented dude that deserves all the love he can possibly get. I highly recommend checking out his first commercial game, Shoot Trip Die. If you want a roguelike top-down shooter with a far more simplistic gameplay loop than something like Enter the Gungeon, then look no further. I've dumped some hours into it, and it's slowly but surely becoming another one of my comfort games. Also, be sure to check out Gappy's Playground. It's a prototype for the next major game he's releasing, which is a major departure from every other Gappy game in the best possible way. I was able to get my hands on the game early, and I'm just waiting for this thing to drop so I can give my money to this man. Fastest purchase in the West. Even Tom Fulp, yes, that Tom Fulp, the motherfucking grandfather of indie games. He equates this game to Meat Boy. That's just about the highest praise you can receive from anyone if you're an indie dev, and that's just the prototype. The full version I've been playing is way cleaner, and the full game cannot come out any sooner. In fact, I'm willing to go to Levi's house, kick in his door, and give him $500 in cash to finish the game in 2 hours. This isn't a joke, this isn't a bit, I couldn't be more serious. I'm starting my car.
See you soon, Pookie Bear.